Giveaway alert, everybody. Microbial giveaway incoming. Our great friends over at Plant Success, creators of the Great White Myco line, are doing a giveaway for Growcast Instagram followers. Here's how you get in on it and get a chance to win a Great White Myco prize pack, including their King Crab. All you got to do is make a post using any Great White product, their King Crab or their Orca or their Great White. Tag at Great White Myco and at Growcast in your post, in your garden, or when you're mixing it up. Show us how you use Great White Myco, tag us, and be entered to win if you're in the USA. And you're entered to win a Plant Success prize pack. That's right, just for my Growcast Instagram followers. How nice of that? How nice of them is that to give away those prizes just for you guys? Plant Success. Find it in your local hydro store. Try the King Crab. You'll absolutely love it. And get in on the giveaway if you got an Instagram. And if you don't got an Instagram, you might want to join it just for giveaways like this. You know, make a little Grow account. Couldn't hurt. All right, everybody. Today we have Brandon Rust back. He's talking more about inputs, his grow method. You're going to really enjoy this one. Thank you all for listening and enjoy the program. Hello, podcast listeners. You are now listening to Growcast. I'm your host, Jordan River, and I want to thank you for tuning in today. Before we get started, please share Growcast, spread the show. It's how we grow. Subscribe for every episode, and give us a good rating and review. It just takes a second, and it helps us out so much. Thank you, guys. I appreciate you all. Today, we have return guest. I told you guys he was coming back. He said he was coming back for a follow-up episode, and here he is from Black Label Organics and the highly popular Rust Brandon Instagram page. We have Brandon Rust. What up, man?
Hey, what's going on, man? Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, we got cut short a little bit last time, so we have to go for a further deep dive. You are an easy guest. My listeners love digging into your brain and your extensive knowledge, so thank you so much for coming back, man. Let's pick up right where we left off, shall we?
Sure, let's go ahead.
Well, last time you were really opening our eyes to the effects of all of these kind of commonly accepted natural inputs. And one of the things we left off on was azomite. You know, this natural input that I believe is very good for things like micronutrients and things like that. Correct me if I'm wrong. And you were kind of saying that that's a no-no. Can you pick up from that spot?
Yeah, sure. So, typically the train of thought with azomite is that you're going to get A to Z trace minerals, micronutrients that the plant is going to be able to utilize. These usually include, but aren't totally limited to, copper, iron, boron, manganese, zinc, molybdenum, silicon, cobalt, selenium. But the thing is, it also contains things like nickel, lead, aluminum. And the thing is, it contains more heavy metals than it does trace mineral elements, and you will never be able to get a soil to the sufficient amount needed using azomite. And if you were to be able to fill that sufficiency with azomite, the amount that you would be using would be so massive, and it would contaminate the soil that you're using. So the thing is with rock dust, it typically is used, but in advertised, volcanic rock dust. What is it exactly? Why are you using it? So I did a lot of these things. I used azomite and I used all the different types of meals, building soils, and I kind of just threw everything together in super soils. And that method, it actually doesn't work. And, what it's really about is finding sufficient amount of nutrient and balance. And azomite, you have to look at the chemical components of what it is. And it's not really able to fulfill the need for cannabis.
The micronutrient requirements for cannabis specifically, which is, especially strain specific. I've seen some that just gobble up a specific micronutrient. I've got questions, but first, what do you do for micronutrient delivery?
Okay, so what I use is across the board, because I do organic cultivation, but I've had to figure out how you scale it. And you scale it by doing the same thing you do with agronomic crops. You use the same type of agronomic inputs. You buy them at large scale. They're cost effective. And these are usually mined mineral inputs, things like gypsum, which is calcium sulfate. Things like magnesium sulfate for magnesium, which is Epsom salt. Okay. If I need iron, you get ferrous iron, which is an amined iron product. If you need potassium sulfate. All of these things are basically, when you look at a bag of these, you would think, hey, this is gravel. Like this is rocks. Like that's what I'm using. But each one is a specific nutrient input. So if I need something like zinc, I'll use zinc sulfate. Zinc sulfate is a mined mineral rock. It goes through and they crush it into a powder. And I use that I will either water it in or I use it as a top dress. So I look at what I need because I test biweekly. So when you're looking at scale, I can't like guess. If I'm guessing, then, I need to be able to hit accurate numbers consistently to have consistent product to be able, because this is a business but we don't want to lose quality, either. So it's about, maintaining the soil sufficiency and balance, which means having the correct pH, having the right calcium levels, magnesium levels, potassium levels, making sure that sodium and your bicarbonate and your chloride is not too high, making sure that all your micronutrient inputs are correct and that you don't have an abundance or a deficient amount of nitrogen.
Okay, so I have to ask then, if you're using these rock mineral dry inputs, what is the difference between me going and buying a synthetic bottle of your favorite brand of nutrients, which I know is harmful to the biology, versus what you're doing? Is it about the amount and the cycling, like you said?
Well, what's happening is typically when you're buying a chemical, it's synthetically produced, which, don't get me wrong, there's an energy cost to mine these minerals out of the earth.
Sure.
But I believe that the cost and damage to the soil ecosystems from the chemical component, the manufacturing side to manufacture the chemicals, all of the byproducts of that process, and then the byproduct of the chemical itself. Because what happens with these synthetic products is they're manufactured so they don't go through any redox and oxidation states. And that's what happens with these natural organic products. They'll break down and they are used.
Right.
Typically what happens with the synthetics is they're over applied and they stay in the soil, or there's abundance of them, they're over applied and they run off.
Okay.
So typically when you're using these organic amendments, you're not over applying them. If you do over apply them, it's difficult to do so. When you're looking at like a synthetic chemical, you're usually looking at something with a very, very high percentage of that specific input. Or maybe you're doing something where it's like a uric ammonia or something like that. There's just, these things are damaging to our ecosystem.
Okay.
And well, so does mining. I mean,
there's no free lunches. We've said this on the show before. And Russ, this is one of the reasons I take the stance on this podcast that I do. Just before you, we had Thor from Viking Gardens, who's a DWC grower who goes for high ppm. I try to cater to everybody because I want to see people growing. There are no free lunches in nature. I leave it to the listeners to decide what their values are. But yeah. I'm just fascinated by your input style and trying to discern, as someone who has a very lay understanding of this stuff, what the major difference is between and I know that there are differences, the chelated EDTA type bottled nutrients versus like an Epsom salt or a mineral rock dust. And you're doing a good job of explaining it, but I've never heard it explained before.
Yeah. So typically in nature, these elements, whatever they are, they're broken down through biology and they fall into solution with water because water is an acid.
Right.
It's a universal acid solvent. Yeah. I mean, it's not an acid. It's a universal solvent. And so if you have an adequate amount of these minerals in the soil, when you water a certain amount of these minerals, they'll fall into solution and become bioavailable for the plant, you know, so the roots can grow into solution, or when they're, passing by the roots are able to transfer that, or while they're, held in solution in pore space and the roots have access to the nutrient rich water, because what's happening is it's falling into solution. And that's actually how I balance the nutrient inputs, because we have what's called saturated paste testing. And that's what I'm looking at. And we can look at every single element that's required. We can look at the pH. We can look at the cationic exchange capacity. We can look at the ppms of every element that's in there. And I can balance it, using the target ranges. And then I can even go so far as to look internally inside the plant by looking at tissue and seeing what the plant is taking from the solution, from saturated paste to the tissue. And then I can take that even a step further, and we can do SAP analysis. And what that does, it allows me to see, what becomes available internally in the plant, but then how the plant is actually moving those things around. So I could see, it's like having foresight. So if the plant isn't showing any signs, this plant looks absolutely perfect, but it's showing that it's using more phosphorus from the bottom leaves of the plant, then I know that I need to increase phosphorus, because it has to be able to fulfill the requirement before it moves up the plant for that particular element.
Whoa.
So I can look at the movement of these minerals internally in the plant itself, and then determine, what this plant may need more of. And here's a good example. One of my cultivars, Death Breath, it has a higher phosphate requirement and a lower nitrogen requirement.
Whoa.
So that's certain little things like that can help me dial in little specifics that'll help me get higher potency. Because if it has a lower nitrogen requirement, that means I have to drop nitrogen down to below the target, what would be the normal target range, because nitrogen will actually inhibit and actually bring down your cannabinoid levels.
Right. That's what I've heard. And that doesn't surprise me that it differs cultivar to cultivar, but that's cool because you're proving it with lab testing. And are you noticing this like across the board? I've said this for so long. It's like they're basically different species the way they act sometimes. Do you find that in testing too?
Yeah, this is what I'm kind of thinking. This is just observation. I had someone reach out to me that's going to help me start writing white papers too. But
that's cool.
I think cultivars that stretch a little bit more need a higher phosphate requirement. And this is what I think is happening. Because phosphorus, the main component, or the main thing about phosphorus for plants is that it's responsible for the creation of adenine triphosphate, ATP, which is the energy exchange currency for all biology, all cellular mechanisms. Right. So in people and plants, it takes this chemical constituent, and what it is a triple phosphate bond. So it needs 3 phosphates to create this energy exchange currency. And so I think it takes more energy to transport and move a lot of these immobile micronutrients and macronutrients. It takes more energy to do that. So it could be, and I could be totally fucking wrong too, but it could be that it just needs more energy for that. So it's going to have a higher phosphate requirement.
Damn, that's super interesting, man. I'm glad that there are people out there working on papers like that, because they're so few and far between. That makes sense though. I want to come back to all of that in the ATP. I have thoughts on that, so don't let me forget. But before that, I want to ask a specific question and circle back on something you said about the super soil. It sounds like the reason, and I want to be specific here. You keep saying at scale, at scale, at scale. When you say, super soil doesn't work, it doesn't work in this application. Would you grow any differently at a smaller scale? If you were forced tomorrow, God forbid, I don't want to, knock on wood here. If you're forced tomorrow to switch to a 4x4, would you grow the exact same way you do now, or would you do it differently?
No, I would do the same thing, because it's the most cost-effective way to produce the highest quality of cannabis.
Damn. So you're just, because the best weed I've ever smoked was super soil. You know what I mean? I guess I got to come down to Oklahoma and get me some Black Label organics. So this is it, news to me as an organic fan. And I don't know, it's just cool, man. It's cool to see you doing your thing.
Super soil it works, right? You can load up a soil with a ton of stuff and get like really great results. But the problem is that things fall out of balance. Like those soils aren't typically balanced, and here's why. And it's one of the reasons why I also don't use meals. when you're looking at a package, a box of, let's say, down to earth bone meal or kelp meal or something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
You'll notice the 3 numbers that represent nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium.
Mm-hmm.
And usually, when I look at the balance, you need a certain amount of potassium, and it's usually around equal parts of nitrogen through veg and then a little higher in flour. You need about, 1/4 of that magnesium, and you need about, 1.5 times the amount of calcium than you do potassium in veg, and then it's almost equal in flour.
Okay.
So you have these kind of targets, right? And then when you're adding, let's say, langbonite, someone's like, oh, well, I need to add a bunch of potassium, so I'm going to add langbonite. What you didn't see on the back of that bag is that 18% of that is also magnesium.
Sure.
So even though it has 0.022 for langbonite, no nitrogen, no phosphorus, has 22% potassium. That potassium isn't immediately available for one. Okay. So that's deficiency that it's trying to fill in soil is going to be released over time. But the magnesium that is in that product, that 18%, which is a huge amount, that is going to be available. So you could potentially be like, hey, I'm really deficient in potassium, so I'm going to go get this langbonite. But the problem is you're deficient in potassium, and magnesium is an antagonist to potassium, and you add in langbonite. So essentially you're adding in a bunch of magnesium, blocking out the remaining potassium that you already had.
Interesting.
And then what you're doing is that potassium you're never going to get it because you just loaded your soil up with a bunch of magnesium that you didn't need, right? And then it's the same thing with NPK. What if you already have high nitrogen and you go load up a bunch of kelp meal, a bunch of bone meal, a bunch of blood meal, and a bunch of alfalfa? Well, here's the thing. All those different products, they all have different rates of breaking down. So over a 30-day period, bone meal can break down completely, 100%. So it's in the soil, right? It doesn't mean it's gone. Doesn't mean that the plant has been able to consume that much. It just means that it's there, but you don't know how much is there because you can't actually gauge that without data.
I see.
Right?
I see.
So less is actually better when you're talking about these organic programs. If you start off with a decent soil, which, I'll be large scale manufacturing soil starting next week. And, my base mix was 30% rice hulls. Okay.
What?
Or not 30% rice hulls. Sorry.
Okay.
It's not
take
30.
That.
It was 30% pumice, 10% rice hulls, 30% peat, 20% compost, 7% castings, and 3% gypsum.
Wow, man. Send me a bag, bro. I'd love to try it.
And then, I had it tested for heavy metals, had it tested for nutrient levels, soil unsaturated paste, and I just needed a little bit more calcium, a little bit more potassium, and a little bit more micronutrients. So I had them add what I knew would be sufficient to get it to the level that it needed to be. And they gave me my sample today. I just sent it out. So that's how I do. I test my soil biweekly. And what I see is that, I was greatly overdoing it back in the day when I didn't fully understand how much cannabis needed, what the levels were. And then adding all these meals together really just complicates things.
Jeez, man.
It worked. But here's the thing, though. If you have a fucking huge ass plant in super soil, right, outside, they're going to get huge and they're probably going to do well because they can fucking handle, like massive nutrient loads when they're huge like that.
Sure. Okay. That's interesting. That's an interesting take.
One of the things that I try to do is I can look at the levels. I can look at the total ppm of salts, and, as long as things like chloride, bicarbonate, and sodium are low, if I have a high ppm say, 12 to like 1500 ppm in my soil solution, it's working just like a hydroponic media would, because I've balanced all of the mineral nutrients and there's such a sufficiency when I'm watering that it's really no different. The only difference is that it comes from biology, nutrient cycling, and then they're getting the added bonus of like the secondary metabolites, the phytohormones, the organic acids, the humulates, all the secondary metabolites produced by all the biology that stimulate different types of immune responses in plants, that stimulate different biopathways for hormone production, for terpene production, for cannabinoid production. All of these different pathways can potentially be stimulated by a lot of these different chemical constituents that are produced by biology and soil.
Jeez, man, you do it different than anyone else, though. Not than anyone else, but you seem to do it very uniquely. It's like you're a Bokashi guy, no myco, trichoderma. Where are you getting the bacterial applications? I'm sorry, you've probably said this before. I apologize, but are you doing like a compost tea? Like, where's the beneficial bacteria coming from in your cost-effective setup?
We don't use compost teas. So at scale, it's just not feasible. Okay, so listen, I shouldn't say that. I want to be very, very clear. Soil food web science works wonderfully for soil, but I do not grow in soil. Okay. I am not a soil grower. I grow organically in a modified growing media.
Yeah.
This has not been weathered. There's no sand, there's no silt, and there's no clay. This thing has not been naturally weathered by Mother Nature. This has been constructed by man to specifically meet what Mother Nature would do over eons.
Sure.
Okay. In a certain type of environment, right?
An optimal environment, right?
Which would be not too wet, not too dry, always nice and humid and warm, right? We're talking, these soils operate very much like a mycology incubator. We've already built, think about all this soil food web science that you've heard of over and over and over. And think of somebody maintaining a plot of land for 1,000 years, right? Or more, and just regenerative. That soil is essentially what we create and we put in these beds. It's there. It's already there. So we don't need to further develop the soil anymore. I don't use earthworms, right? I don't use crop covers. I don't use anything of the sort because the soil is perfectly sufficiently minerally balanced. It works like a hydroponic media, even though it's completely organic and it's full of biology.
Man. So again, I'm sorry, I must sound stupid, but like, where is your bacterial application coming from?
Oh yeah. So I was really fortunate enough to have a friend whose uncle owns a biotechnology company, and she works there and she does all of their networking and sales stuff. And so I get all of the specific consortiums of microorganisms that I either put together myself.
Get out of here.
Yeah. So I have a new one coming too, dude. Okay. So check this out. For a couple of years now, man, I've been researching all of the different bacillus strains of bacteria to find all of the ones that have the highest enzymatic, all the highest secondary metabolite production. So you know how we look for all these cultivars that have like the highest terpenes and the highest cannabinoids?
Sure.
There are bacteria and microorganisms that are just like that. They are not all the same, And so we, through science, has been able to say, dude, this bacteria right here has the highest phosphatase and enzyme production, which is going to solubilize phosphate from phosphorus in the soil, from phosphorus minerals.
Mm-hmm. Right. So that's sure. That's maybe something you would find in one of the phosphorus boosting products like your Mammoth P or something like that. Or is that different?
Exactly. Okay. Those are the types of bacteria. So I'm able to put these things together pretty inexpensively. I do sell spore of some of these premixed, like the Microbe Plus from my company, Bokashi Earthworks. And what's really interesting is I work with people like the soil doctor, Brent Bryant, and Jenny from New Age Labs. And these are all people who are on the forefront of the science as well. And I share data so they can see what's happening in the soil, and we have confirmation we can see. And what we've seen is that the ability to cycle phosphorus, even when the phosphorus availability is low in soil, when it falls into solution, it's showing that it's cycling really well because it has a lot of it in solution. And also the same with manganese as well. I mean, it does it on a small scale for everything else, but those two particular elements are what we're seeing as a constant with this particular product. That, and obviously the stuff with, you know, the suppression of pathogens and the other benefits of the metabolite production.
This is killer stuff, man. It always gets me excited when people are putting scientific data behind this. You know that I work in different fields where there is more scientific data on things like regenerative agriculture, but cannabis is so unique because there's so many different outcomes because the wide variety of chemicals found within it. So this type of data and research, I feel you're really helping the community. Love or hate Brandon Rust, this type of research is important.
And it's going to be really interesting too, because we have, 33 usable acres and we're starting all of our outdoor, and we are going to be using an imported soil, but over the next 3 to 5 years, hopefully 3, that land is going to be bioremediated. We're going to be doing all of the soil food web stuff. We're going to be doing, today I had like 900 pounds of spent beer grain dropped off at the property. I'm going to inoculate that and just spread it into the soil, cover it up. I'll let it inoculate. I'll spread it up kind of like an IMO pile. I'll do crop covers on the property. We'll bring in compost. We have cows there right now. We're going to build that soil, and then hopefully we'll be able to plant genetics that have been developed for the area directly into the soil and create our own terroir. I mean, that's the ultimate goal.
Killer. Wow,
but
man.
When we're talking about like greenhouse modified soil applications where people are scaling and they need to keep like a high quality craft, this is the best way to do it because you can automate your watering system. You can top dress once or twice throughout the run and just, make sure you do your basic integrated pest management maintenance and your pruning regiments, and you're good to go.
Jeez, man. It's always an eye-opening interview when you come on and talk about these types of approaches in the grow room. I have a question. It's a little bit of a left turn, but here we are, and I know that you're the guy to ask about this, man. We'll be right back with Brandon Rust. But before that, AC Infinity, got to give some love. They make the best grow fans in the game. Use code GROWCAST15 at acinfinity.com on fans and tents and now fabric pots. They got what you need. GROWCAST15. And make sure to send us a screenshot of you using any of our giveaways to be entered to win free seeds each and every month. And speaking of which, congrats to David R. for taking down last month's seed giveaway for April. David R., congratulations. You better hop in your DMs, buddy. You won free seeds courtesy of GrowCast. Anyways, AC Infinity, where was I? AC Infinity, they make the best tents. They make the best fans. They've got new fabric pots with little grommets for low stress training. They're stepping up their game. Really, though, if you don't have an AC Infinity fan, you can upgrade your tent because they have Simple Series, S Series with a 10-speed fan controller, and then they have their Smart T Series. And I got to tell you, they're the best fans in the game. They're feather light. They are an upgrade if you're working with something else. So go and get them. They will kick on at humidities, temperatures, whatever you need. Pick up a tent while you're there. Use code GROWCAST15. Send us a screenshot. And much love to the great and powerful AC Infinity, folks. All right, let's get back to Brandon Rust. I have a question. It's a little bit of a left turn, but here we are, and I know that you're the guy to ask about this, man. I recently saw a couple disturbing articles on microplastics, specifically when it comes to human health. The first one I saw was a research paper done on the ability for microplastics to travel through the human placenta and how these microplastics embed themselves within your cellular structure, kind of like you were saying earlier when you were saying you were viewing inside your plant cellular structure. And they really become part of you and can cause all sorts of horrible diseases from disrupting ATP, exactly the aforementioned ATP, endocrine disruption, a host of horrible problems. Then the second thing I saw, I think, was actually a Joe Rogan Experience podcast episode, but I saw an article on it, and it was with an epidemiologist, and I think an endocrinologist as well, talking about these same microplastics basically permeating everything from tap water to seawater to, the foods we're eating and everything. So my question to you is, I know cannabis is this bioaccumulator for things like, mercury, but what are your thoughts on plastics in cannabis and maybe specifically microplastics?
This is the, first time it's ever been presented to me, to be honest. I haven't really seen any research about microplastics. I do know this though, right? If it is a hydrocarbon compound, it can be broken down with microbiology.
Yeah, baby. I'm glad you said that. There's some microbe out there that'll eat it, right?
There is. And that's the greatest thing. Here's kind of the crazy thing, right? There's a database of discovered microbes, their genome sequence, blah, 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 but there's no other information, right? It's just literally databases full of different microbes. So what happens is companies will go through databases and they'll be like, hey, what's this? Let's see what this does. And they'll start doing some research. Does it have any applications for biofuels? Does it have application for creating electricity? Wow. Does it have applications for dissolving chemical waste? Does it have applications for remediating radiation? Like there's something for biology to do. And
jeez, man,
there's no shortage of chemicals that can be produced and synthesized that can break down just about any hydrocarbon compound.
Wow, man.
It's just a matter of, finding what those are. But again, if we're worried about these types of things, then it's on us as consumers, and it's hard. It's hard to not use what's available because we all want to have businesses and do this.
Oh,
and
you
that.
Can't do it all. You'll drive yourself crazy, man. And I think that's what drives a lot of people to kind of go nuts and lash out at other people about their practices. It's like, hey man, no one gets away on this earth for free. We all must consume. But again, it's about doing it right. And also I'm glad that there's hope from what you just described. Using and studying.
There's solutions.
Yeah, totally.
There's solutions, right? If somebody presents problems, let's just think about the solution.
Fuck
instead
yes.
of all presenting, because I see it a lot. I see a lot of people presenting problems instead of just presenting solutions for something that people haven't even thought was an issue.
100%, man. It's called a solution-oriented mindset. It's a very healthy mindset to have. And if you end up with a problem-oriented mindset for too extended period of a time, it's not good for your health and happiness. But that's for a different podcast. Shit, I was just going to say something about microplastics and testing.
But there's things like, again, we talked about kelp and about heavy metal accumulation. You have to kind of be aware of all the different things, and that's one of the things too. I'm really lucky because I have a huge soil mixing yard here in Oklahoma where I'm at, and they source a lot of their products are all local. They have manure compost from the local stockyards. They have local gypsum mine here. They have things that are pretty, like my whole soil is almost completely local except for, a few mineral inputs, that have to be imported.
So I wanted to dig in on that subject with the heavy metals because I am a super soil grower. I got my Purple Cow and I use all sorts of fancy Photo Plus and King Crab and all this fun stuff. I do use a Nourish L humic acid. And that is a seabed derived humic acid. I know you're not a fan of the sea products either, but from a testing perspective, and not the Leonardite or Leonardite bullcrap humic acids, from a testing perspective, do the high quality humic acids sufficiently tie up the heavy metals within a soil application in your estimation?
To give you a straightforward answer, I would have to test. I would have to do the data. I would have to get a soil that I knew was contaminated.
Okay.
I would have to get a soil that I knew was contaminated with whatever heavy metal it was. Arsenic and cadmium are usually the main offenders, but lead and there's a couple mercury also.
Right.
So if I tested a soil, it was, we knew that this was going to be a problem, and then we used both of the amino acid products, which are natural chelators and can help mitigate some of those issues. And then those humic and fulvics which are known to do that. It was brought to my attention by Medically Fit that also gypsum can also help mitigate heavy metals as well.
Oh.
And what they're doing is they're basically tying them up and making them into an inorganic form. And when they become inorganic, they're not usable by the plant.
Right. The gypsum, though, I didn't know that. Wow.
I didn't either. And I was like, I know about the humic. I know about the amino acids because I've done a ton of research, but I didn't know about the gypsum. So that was brought to my attention. He shared some research papers with me, which was pretty cool.
That's dope, man.
But the really, I would just have to see, and then how much does it take of what to mitigate the issue? So here's the thing too, since we're on the topic of the amino acids, I use soy-based aminos. I have research that shows that animal-based aminos can be problematic for plants. And I'm kind of like, I don't really use any animal inputs in my mixes, in my soil. It's all basically mineral-based. I have, obviously I have vermicompost,
sure,
which is worm poop, which is, I don't really
technically an animal, but I see what you're saying.
I don't know if you want to get, some people will be like, you can't imagine how like some people come at you. Like, it's just ridiculous. Sometimes it's like, okay.
You got to move on, man.
It's not vegan because it's got manure in it. And it's like, I mean, those cows ate grass and hay, and that shit is basically hay and grass.
Oh, we had this conversation last time, man. Cows are not created equally. Cow feed is not created equally.
Yeah, that's true too.
Yeah.
So the amino acids are really interesting because it's the only input that I use for my nitrogen source. I don't know if we covered this last week.
You did, man. And I still don't like, I have some products that are amino products, like green aminos and things like that. And I think I kind of got it. Basically what you were saying is nitrogen eventually becomes these acids. So you can kind of cut out that conversion process and exclusively use those. Yeah. I don't use a lot of N in my garden. And maybe that's why. Like you did bring that up last time, and I've still been thinking about it.
Yeah. Because the interesting thing too is, so I started doing testing. I started eliminating completely what I would normally use for the nitrogen, whether that would be like alfalfa and some, maybe some bone meal and stuff like that, which has, phosphorus in it as well. But I just started using the amino acids, and I find that I can use far less than I originally anticipated, because it's really hard to see on a saturated paste test because it doesn't come up as nitrate. It doesn't come up as ammonium because it's neither of those things. That's amino acids. So the only way that you can actually see how biologically available it is and how it's being uptake is through a SAP test, and what the SAP test is, it shows you bricks and it shows you your
I was going to say, I'm about to jump in with a left turn. I want to hear your thoughts on bricks, but finish your thought first.
Yeah. So there's a total carbohydrate like count, and then there's bricks. And if the bricks isn't higher, then that the conversion isn't happening, which means that you're lacking photosynthesis. And that's one of the things that SAP can tell you also. But what happens is, with the SAP test, it gives you total nitrogen, it gives you nitrate and ammonium in the tissue. And when you look at my tests, which isn't like everybody else's, you don't see any ammonium and you don't see any nitrate. You don't see those in the plant tissue whatsoever. But the total overall nitrogen is really high, and that is actually the amino acids that have been stored in the tissue.
Whoa.
That we're seeing. And to get to a kind of a higher level, it doesn't take much of the amino acids. And what happens is, if you actually use too much, what ends up happening is the amino acids are used up by the biology and microorganisms in the soil. They'll use up that, and then they'll actually leave more nitrogen in the soil.
Okay.
And then that is converted into ammonium. So you'll actually see a spike in ammonium if you're using too much of the amino acids on a saturated or on a standard soil test. So the only way you can really gauge, and it's one of the things that I'm doing now, is to do the tissue and sap testing to see how everything is being kind of stored in the plant and moved around, and then see, how much total nitrogen as far as amino acids go. When it comes to Brix, the importance of Brix is if you see high Brix, then you know that there's a high photosynthetic conversion rate happening. So that's really the benefit of seeing the Brix. Brix doesn't necessarily equate to, pest resistance. Like if you introduced aphids to plants that had high Brix, it doesn't necessarily mean that those things are going to be resilient or going to be able to fend those off. Healthy plants will naturally have better defense immune systems. If these things have been loaded up and they have an adequate amount of calcium, they'll be able to do some really cool, interesting things to help fight off pests. They can produce some really irritating chemicals that plants don't like. But what the real benefit is, the pests are mostly attracted to ammonium and the nitrates. So if you have a lot of those in your leaf tissue and they're not being converted, and that's where the Brix is, right? So the Brix is a good measurement of the conversion of if you are uptaking those chemicals. If they're not being converted into proteins, then it's most likely that you're lacking some type of either one of the 5 type of essential elements for photosynthesis, which is, of course, nitrogen, magnesium, iron, molybdenum, and sulfur. Those are kind of the main components for like chlorophyll and photosynthesis to take place and for the conversion of nitrogen into protein. And so if you're lacking, let's say, magnesium and molybdenum, what'll happen is that you will not be able to convert those chemicals into proteins. And so when you're converting those, when you have a higher conversion rate, that's when you're seeing the higher Brix. But the Brix is going to fluctuate throughout the day because the plant has what's called a DLI, daily lighting integral, which means it will fulfill a certain, photosynthetic like capacity. And then it's kind of like, hey, I can't really do anymore.
That's interesting because I've heard Brix attributed to all sorts of different attributes, like you said. So yeah, interesting stuff.
As far as testing is concerned, and when we're looking at it on SAP, test is a good high Brix is a high indication of the plant's photosynthetic ability to turn, and then to turn the complex carbohydrates, nitrogen, and all that into proteins and all the other constituents.
We literally are back up against it again, man. Like you jam back every episode. We didn't even get to all the questions. And I'm saying all this flatteringly. Thank you, Brandon Rust. I mentioned in the beginning, Black Label Organics, the Instagram page, rust.brandon, Bokashi Earthworks. What else you got for us?
You can check out Majestic Craft Cannabis. They're another facility I'm the cultivation science director at. Organic Glaze Farms out here in Oklahoma. I do their soil and agronomy. Care Waialua out in Oahu. They're the biggest patient-based farm on the whole island. I do their soil science and agronomy. There is another company out here. I'm going to probably be working soon with Carter Creek Cannabis and Jinx Proof out here in Oklahoma.
Oh, it's amazing.
Maybe help them get on to a more organically sustainable type of program. And there's maybe a couple other people out here that have reached out that I'm just trying to help, really drive the organic craft side of things out here so I can kind of set an example and kind of push this as hard as I can.
I love it. Hey, and just maybe for a second here, I know Jinx suffered another health issue he was talking about on his Instagram, so maybe I'll take a second here. And maybe this episode is a little bit late, but and the members know I posted about this so they can send him cards and stuff. But get better, Jinx. We love Jinx so much, and
he's
Miss
a good
Rose,
dude.
and all the activism work with the autism awareness and his posts. They literally bring tears to my eyes. I'm not ashamed to admit. So get better, Jinx, and we love you, buddy. Everybody here loves you.
Yeah, it's he's a really good dude. He does a lot of good work, and I can say that his genetics are fire. What they're producing over at Carter Creek is fire.
Oh, that's cool, man.
I got to sample some of that at the Chronic Palooza.
God, I wish I was there.
It was fun. But again, I had a lot of people reach out and be like, man, I feel like it was pay to play. And a lot of them are, man. I have some ideas about putting on a competition where all of the entries are completely secret. Like the judges don't know. It's just literally a number. We don't know your farm.
Yeah,
and then the judges are selected by a raffle. Maybe there's 100 people, 10 of them are going to be randomly chosen. And then even that is totally transparent. You get to see who the judges picked. You can get to see their results, their notes, that kind of stuff. That way it's completely transparent and there's no like pay to play type things. And it's truly like, hey, this is, or even, something, I don't know, just things. I'm always so busy and I'm always thinking about new things.
I'm down, man. I'm down. And let us know how we can help. This has been another educational episode, bro. So thank you again. And yeah, thank you, listeners, everybody, at Growcast on Instagram. And we'll let you go. Stay tuned for more.
All right.
This is Brandon Rustin, Jordan River signing off saying be safe and grow smarter.
Talk to you guys soon.
That's our show, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. Before we wrap it up, shout out to Photon Tech Lighting. I love my Photon Tech. Growcastpodcast.com/Photon will bring you right to the online store. Use code GROWCAST. Save 5% on your bar-style lights. Shoot us a screenshot of your code. Be entered to win free seats, like David R. It was David R, right? I have it written down. It's Photon Tech, baby. I got the 600 watt, and my God, it is pumping out light. You can get away with the 465 and a 4x4, and you get that high efficiency, high output bar-style light. Code GROWCAST. Make sure to send us a screenshot. The only code that comes with the chance to win free seats, folks. And get yourself a Photon Tech, that beautiful, beautiful red, sexy bar style. You will enjoy it. All right, everyone. That's all for today. Shout out to Illinois Canna Consulting, Jay Blank for doing the beat, my usual buddies. We'll see you next time on Growcast. Thank you so much for subscribing and listening. Best of luck in your gardens. Bye-bye.